Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, hey, Jamie. Go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea Voodoo with the MSU Science Festival. I'm here with Jamie Mathewson, Ian, and Ramjan. They are from Wiki Edu, and they'll be telling us about changing the face of science, adding biographies of women scientists to Wikipedia. I'll let you all take it from here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to be talking about adding women in STEM to Wikipedia. It'll be a little bit quick because this is short, but I want to share some information about adding women in STEM to Wikipedia. So if it'll let me advance my slides, that would be helpful. So I do like to start with just thinking about why Wikipedia matters. Specifically, we're at a science festival, so why does Wikipedia matter to scientists? So I want to step back and talk about Wikipedia. I'm sure everyone here knows what Wikipedia is and uses it. But it is the sixth most visited website in the world with 500 million unique readers every month. And it's about 20 billion page views. So there are a lot of people getting information from Wikipedia. And who creates Wikipedia? I know a lot of people have some preconceptions about that. There are about 80,000 active volunteer Wikipedians worldwide. And that's working on every language Wikipedia. And then some of the information we have about those editors is that about 80 to 90% of them are men. And one quick thing, since we're talking about women in STEM, is that only 18.72% of biographies are of women. So a lot of underrepresentation of women on Wikipedia. So in terms of pulling back, thinking about science, I want to talk about medical content. In 2014, there was a study showing that the vast majority of people in the public are getting their health information from Wikipedia. So we can, in another venue, have a discussion about people using these sources. But I think most importantly, we know people are getting their health content from Wikipedia. And that's why Wiki Education wants to make sure that it's really accurate, it's reliable, that people can verify it, right? That's what Wikipedia editors are working to do, is just make sure this is high quality information, since so many people are making real world decisions based on what they learn there. And let's zoom in a little bit onto something like the coronavirus disease 2019 page. As you can imagine, this page has only been around a little over a year. And we can see, this is looking at the readership every single day. There are a lot of people, or have been a lot of people accessing it. And there was a really massive spike that we see. And that's when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. So a ton of people flocked to Wikipedia to find out, what is this disease? What are the potential impacts on my life? I don't think people quite admitted the impact it was going to have on their lives at that time, but a ton of people accessed it. And in fact, 20 million people have read that page in the last year. So again, when people are looking for information online, they're going to Wikipedia, or they're ending up on Wikipedia through their Google search. And that really makes Wikipedia an effective platform for science communication, right? Because it's where the public is. So if we can actually work on making sure it's as high quality as possible, that it reflects the scientific literature, then we can really use this as an effective communication tool. And so what do people find on Wikipedia? We could go on for many hours, and believe me, I have, about information and what's high quality on Wikipedia and what's missing. But since we're talking about women in STEM, I just want to pull back up that statistic about only 18% of biographies on Wikipedia are about women. So a lot of women are missing from Wikipedia, you can imagine from that statistic, but it's not just about women's biographies missing, because some people have a biography and there's still so much more to do. There's so much information to add to make sure it's as representative of their careers, of why they're notable. And I want to share an example that one of our program participants worked on. So we do run a program working with scientists and having them add information to Wikipedia. So we train them. Chelsea is an alum of one of those courses that we ran. Ian is an instructor. And in 2018, we worked with somebody who selected the article on Jennifer Doudna. So if you took a look at her biography in 2018, it existed, right? She was not one of the people missing from Wikipedia. She had this page. And if we look at her research and career section, we can see some information primarily about kind of her early studies, the work she did in someone else's lab, some information about her as a faculty at Berkeley. And then there are 3 sentences on the work that Jennifer Doudna did with CRISPR. It actually says they generated a new discovery, which I personally, as a non-scientist, find to be a really exciting sentence in concept and would imagine you would add more than another 2 sentences. But for years, this is what that looked like, until one of our participants decided to take it on. And the purple highlighting here is some of the information that they added. And so we can just see, we're not going to read through this together. We don't have the time. I encourage you to go take a look. But the CRISPR section is so much more fleshed out. There's information not only about, well, what does CRISPR mean, but also what was Jennifer Doudna's involvement, right? And this is really exciting and important because let's go back to looking at page views. There's a massive spike in page views in October of 2020 for Jennifer Doudna, and that's because she won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So if she had won the Nobel Prize in 2018, I think people might have come across her article and they might not have known exactly what her contributions were. Why did she win this Nobel Prize? I think it's really, really important for representing women in science, for recognizing women in science, to make sure they're represented here. And this is just one of the, I think, thousands of examples at this point of the women in science that some of our program participants have added. So I just hope this helps you see the work that is to be done and that you can get involved. And one other quick plug, anyone out there at MSU or anywhere else who's a university instructor, you can also join our student program. So this is Wiki Education's kind of flagship program. We actually work with, I think, several classes at MSU. And we work with students as they actually add to Wikipedia. So they could expand the article on CRISPR, they could expand the article on a biography of someone. We have people working across disciplines and across sciences. So there's a link here, teach.wikiedu.org, that I encourage you to visit. And when I get a chance, I'm also going to drop a form link into the chat. I don't know if they'll have access to this on Zoom, but maybe Chelsea can then share it over on Facebook so that if you want information for us, you can share your contact information. Okay, and I'm going to hand it over to Ian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian. I'm actually a Spartan. I did my PhD at Michigan State a while ago, before it was so great. And I've been a Wikipedian for the last 17 years. So one of the things I want to talk about is how do you get started? What are some tips? If the easiest way to become a Wikipedian or a Wikipedia editor is, no, please, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's good. Okay. Easiest way to become a Wikipedian or a Wikipedia editor is to click the edit button. That's all it really takes. The Wikipedia has an extremely low barrier to entry. Click that button, make a change on a page, although not the main page because that's locked from editing, but make a change and you're a Wikipedia editor. There is no panel out there who's going to approve your edits. There's no application process or secret handshake or anything like that. There's a very low barrier to becoming a Wikipedian. But the thing is, there's a lot to learn after that. Even after 17 years, I'm still learning things. But the easiest way, the way to get started, make an edit. Don't worry about breaking things. You can't break Wikipedia. Can't be done. I do recommend creating an account if you're going to edit Wikipedia, just so that you can come back and find what you've done, and people tend to take you more seriously when you have an account. And if you do create an account, don't create it in your real name. It's easier to decide later to release more information about yourself. You can never, it's hard to claw back your privacy once you've released your real name. Anyway, if you're going to contribute to Wikipedia, the most important thing to remember is, or to know, is that Wikipedia is a community. And if you want to find community, and especially as somebody contributing to women in science, one of the best places to go is on the next slide, the Wiki Project Women in Red. Wiki projects are groups of Wikipedians who have joined together to work on a common interest, and Women in Red is a group whose project, whose goal is to turn articles, is to create articles about women. So if you've ever been on a Wikipedia page, seen a red link, clicked on it and gotten nowhere, that's because the page doesn't exist. Create that page, and now it's a blue link. Women in Red has done an awful lot of work. They're one of the driving forces that has gotten the number of biographies of women up to 18.7% from something like 15% where it was when they started. If you want to go there, there's a short URL there, w.wiki/347. That'll get you to this page. Another thing that every page on Wikipedia has is a talk page. Up at the top, there's some links. One says talk. You can go there, and on an article, you can discuss how to improve the article. At Women in Red, you can talk to people, you can get help in getting started. You can get advice in terms of how to edit. And by all means, give it a try. It's important to realize that this is a community of people who, for the most part, are really interested in getting new people involved. They're really interested in being helpful. You're going to find a few jerks everywhere else in the world. Wikipedia is actually much nicer than the internet as a whole. Next slide, please. And if you do, as Jamie mentioned, we do have some programs where we work with faculty, grad students, professionals, people like that, to teach them to edit. We're always looking for sponsors for these. We have sponsored opportunities. We have opportunities where people pay on their own. And if you want to learn more about this, click on learn.wikiedu.org, and you can, get in touch. Maybe you'll be in a class that I teach someday in the future. Thanks. Chelsea?
Ian.
Hey everyone, as I said earlier, my name is Chelsea Voodoo. So yes, I'm with the MSU Science Festival, but something I've done before is I participated with Wiki Edu. And what I specifically did was the COVID-19 project. So that was quite a unique experience for me, because I remember I was thinking like, oh, what can I do as a science communicator to help disseminate information much more clearly and to make sure that we're combating misinformation. So by joining that Wiki Edu project, I learned from scratch exactly what do I do when I'm editing with Wikipedia. So yes, you can just go on there and edit and whatnot, but there are different tips and tricks that do help out, especially after you've done so many edits. So I've been a part afterwards with the confidence that I built from this program. I participate in stuff with like the NSPN, the National Science Policy Network, and also 500 Women in Science. They also do stuff as well, where imagine you're all together on a call and everyone is working on a different Wikipedia page, or you can work on it together. And what's really fun about this is that you're not doing it alone, and that you have people there that can ask questions and even encourage each other and give suggestions on different pages that need more editing. So something that I learned from Wiki Edu is that there are different classes of pages, and some that need more editing than others. There's even science pages that you would just get a very simple definition. But what's even more important is what we're talking about today, which is amplifying women. So as Jamie said earlier, only 18% of the biographies are of women, and that's a very low number. And we definitely need to amplify that amount, because when people are searching something, Wikipedia is one of the first things that turns up. Even though back in high school, they would tell me, oh, wow, Wikipedia is not the thing that you want to cite. Now in college, they're like, oh, did you check Wikipedia? So you may hear that, oh, you shouldn't use it. But the fact is that whenever you put something on there, there are other people on there that are checking what you're putting. So you can't just put something random and then it's just not correct. There are people there that are checking it. And let's say that someone messes with the page and you don't find that accurate, you can go back and see the past edits as well, and you can revert back your stuff. So you don't have to be too afraid about losing everything. What was really cool with Wiki Edu was that I was able to see that the pages that I was working on was the Michigan and the Florida COVID-19 pages. And after I started with the Florida one, it just took off after. Like, it was getting like tens of thousands of views. And I was just like, wow, it's really good that people are actually seeing this, because I became like very obsessed with checking those COVID-19 numbers and updating them. And I felt like I was helping people because Michigan and Florida were at very, well, right now they're still pretty bad with COVID numbers. So with the Women in Science biographies, it's really important because we have so many of them that are going unnoticed. Whenever there are these discoveries like Jamie had mentioned, usually it's men of science that are receiving these recognitions. Unfortunately, the women of science are sometimes left in the dust. For example, like when it was coming to the discovery of DNA, that they only acknowledged the men, really. We only were recently hearing about afterwards by acknowledging the women as a part of the project. So something that I do really recommend, which is something that I truly do enjoy, is participating with this with other people. You can get together with a group of friends virtually, which is nice because there's a pandemic and whatnot, and you all are on your computer and you can walk each other through and you can learn together and you can say like, hey, this is my favorite scientist and this is what's missing about her or them. And you can say, oh, wow, we need to actually build a page for someone because some of them don't even exist. And it's something that I really, truly enjoyed. And this was a free course for me, which is very good. And it was very accessible as well. And it's something that I really recommend. So I will let Jamie and Ian wrap it up.
Thanks, Chelsea. I didn't know if there was an opportunity for people to ask questions on Facebook.
Yes, definitely. They can ask questions and they can ask questions on here as well.
Okay. We don't have any.
Yes, we don't have any yet right now, but I'll definitely let you know if any of them come through. There's a little bit of delay between Facebook and Zoom.
Sure. Well, Ian, then I have a question. What kind of information do people typically add to a biography? Let's say a woman in science.
A lot of the time it's the existence at all. A lot of pages don't exist. A lot of pages there's a tendency for men to interpret women through the men in their lives, to use men to explain women to ordinary people. It's a lot of really inherent and deep-seated sexism in the way we think and write. And one of the things that people can do is dial that back a little. Don't talk about women scientists as sort of adjuncts to, or don't talk about them in terms of the men in their life. Talk about them as people. There's a lot that's very often one of the harder things to write about, really. So if you can track down sources, it's good. But one of the harder things to write about is someone's actual contribution to science. It's easy. You'll often see they worked here, they did this, and something about their science communication activism. There's often not a lot written on their actual contribution to their field of study. And it's one of the things that, especially if you know a bit, if you have some expertise, you can add a lot, and it really helps bolster what's there.
That's great. I think I've heard you tell real horror stories about things. I mean, I've also just worked on Wikipedia for 10 years, so I have experienced those horror stories, but I know we've had participants come across, scientists where you type their name in and then it leads to an article about her and her husband, right? And I know we've had people, or yeah, they have that redirect that somebody searches for somebody and then it just redirects to the husband that was the scientist, because obviously there were barriers within science, well, now too, but so anyway, I think it's really fascinating to hear about what people learn through that exercise. I like that stage of all of our training programs where people really have to just start diving in and reading, pick 5 biographies and read through them, and you'll start seeing stuff like that. And you'll see, well, this is something really, I want to say easy, that you can even fix, right? Whether it's something to do with pronouns. I know often I find on women's biographies, maybe they say the name at the very beginning and then it's just she for the rest of the time. I'm like, okay, well, if you were writing anything like, if this were in a newspaper or anywhere else, you would still say their name, right? So just really small things that I think people can do to start getting used to that editing process, because it's fun. I think editing Wikipedia is a lot of fun and it does feel like you're doing this great service, and you are, so.
That there's nothing I'm going to do in my life that's going to have nearly the impact of editing Wikipedia and helping people to impact Wikipedia?
Yeah, we definitely have professors in our student program who've said over and over, you know, some of my students are more widely read on this topic than I am. And this is my area of study. This is what I publish in, right? But obviously, scientific publications matter and they're important. And that's actually how we create Wikipedia. But you are going to have a much broader audience through a resource like Wikipedia. So if you're thinking about that science communication piece, if you're thinking about affecting change in so many spaces, right? I like to say that Wikipedia is not blocked on the hill, right? So if you have staffers who are needing to learn about random science information or any topic really, they're ending up on Wikipedia, right? They're trying to get a quick overview, a quick summary. And I don't think a lot of them are necessarily clicking through and finding the source material and reading an entire literature review, right? This is the information they're getting. So it's a real opportunity for people to affect public perception and understanding of science.
I completely agree, Ian and Jamie. I see we're already done with our time slot. I really
Great.
hope that our audience enjoyed this. I did. And I hope that our audience will also be editing Wikipedia now as well. So thank you so much for joining us again for the MSU Science Festival. Everyone else, please stay tuned for the rest of the talks for the rest of the evening. And we're very excited to have you all for the rest of April. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.